Doctors are human around the world. So if patients first realize that, because when they're going to a doctor, unless it's a routine visit, they aren't at their best. But if you can try to think to also show some humanity, to your physician, or ask them how they're doing, and maybe they won't tell you, but they will appreciate.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor.
Now, here's your host, Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗍.
But who is taking care of them? Behind the white coat are real people who are carrying grief, pressure, impossible expectations, administrative burdens, moral injury, and the emotional weight of caring for patients during some of the hardest moments of their lives. Today, we are talking about why doctors need to feel heard, valued, supported, and protected, and why improving physician well-being is essential not only for doctors, but also for their patients and the future of healthcare. Welcome back to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate and entrepreneurship can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. I'm your host, Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗍𝗍, and today we are expanding that conversation beyond money and real estate to talk about what physicians need in order to remain whole while doing incredibly demanding work. I'm joined today by Kim Downey. She's a physical therapist, 3-time cancer survivor, author, speaker, and a passionate advocate for physician well-being. Kim is the founder of Stand Up for Doctors, which is a platform dedicated to amplifying physician voices, bringing greater awareness to the human challenge of practicing medicine, and helping create a healthcare culture in which doctors feel supported and valued. She also serves as an ambassador for organizations working to improve the well-being of healthcare professionals. She's curated 2 collaborative books sharing the emotional and deeply human stories of physicians. And I'm so glad to have her here today. Kim, welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Thank you so much for all you do for physicians, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, Kim, I know you're not a physician, but you have become one of the most passionate advocates for doctors. Do you mind sharing how that mission began for you?
Sure. So I was working as a pediatric physical therapist in a local elementary school, and I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in the fall of 2020. And the surgeon incidentally removed 3 of my parathyroids along with my thyroid, which caused a series of complications with calcium regulation and kidney function, which I still deal with on a day-to-day basis. And the next summer, I blacked out and fell and hit my head. And my nephrologist thinks low calcium caused a cardiac arrhythmia. And over the next 2 months, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, a concussion, 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 syndrome, a whiplash injury, and a broken toe. So I went to 4 months of physical therapy myself for neck issues and dizziness, and left my job amidst my health challenges. And my physical therapist had me in good shape by December 29, 2021. He discharged me, but the next day, I was back on the operating table because we just found out I had breast cancer. So I had surgery and a month of radiation for that. And right on the heels of that, we found out I had breast cancer on the other side. So I had surgery and a month of radiation for that. And that's not even going into detail about navigating cancer 3 times during a global pandemic.
Yes.
So as hard as it was for doctors, it was also very challenging for patients. And I developed a friendly relationship with my radiologist. And he performed what I refer to as a couple feats of miraculous technical skill on me. And I know that my first surgery was a success due to his skill and that of the surgeon. So by the fall of 2022, after 2 years of constant medical issues, and I kept thinking, one more thing and I'll be done, one more thing and I'll get back to my regular life, I showed up for what I hope to finally be a routine imaging visit and a welcome opportunity to see my radiologist, and he wasn't there. And when I asked where he was, they said he died a month ago. And I said, "Are you joking?" I panicked. I thought I was going to see him any second. And of course, they said no. And when I asked what happened, they said they didn't know. And I fell apart. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop shaking. My arms and legs went numb. I just felt in my heart in that moment that he had died by suicide. And I came to find out that that was the case. And it changed my whole entire life. I felt called to support doctors. And that's how it all started.
Wow. Yeah, that is such a traumatic experience. Not only everything that you had gone through in that short time frame in the midst of a pandemic, and then to experience that loss is heartbreaking. And, unfortunately, physician suicide is a very real issue that doesn't get talked about enough. And I know obviously you're an incredible advocate for that, and we'll talk more about that. But I did want to ask a question. How did facing cancer three separate times influence the way that you see how doctors care for patients behind the scenes, going from a patient and then ultimately to a physician advocate?
So being a healthcare professional myself, I was a physical therapist for 30 years. So a lot of the struggles that doctors face, challenges, I had faced some of the similar challenges as far as, loss of autonomy and with the struggles with the EMR and those kinds of things. Through this work now and seeing my own physicians during the pandemic, I also acknowledge challenges that doctors face on top of what, like a physical therapist would face. And one is for certain specialties, like you typically don't need a physical therapist in the middle of the night, right? So just those being on call for, 30 hours at a time, or just the challenges that come with that. And then also, what happened is when doctors would have to separate themselves from their family during the pandemic. Like I had a critical care pulmonologist on my podcast, and he shared how for months he lived in his basement. He didn't want to expose his family. So his wife would leave him a plate of food at the top of the stairs. So just all of those things, it humanized doctors even more. So obviously I always knew doctors were human, right? And I'm a human too. And when I would go to the doctor, it would be once or twice a year for regular visits. They tell you you're fine. I'd be friendly and polite. We were to each other. You share a couple stories and they say, come back next year. But through all this, I've had both wonderful and not so great experiences with doctors. I've seen 46, if you count all the radiologists and anesthesiologists. So I've had incredible and some painful experiences as well. So just the doctors that were really there and were so present, it just made all the difference and filled my heart. And sometimes now, knowing all that I do and being so involved in these spaces, I almost wonder how they can do it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. The pandemic was definitely a very difficult time for patients and for physicians. And, from my experience, I was working inpatient in the hospital, and my wife was pregnant with our first kiddo, our first son, Jack. And I remember being terrified, and so incredibly anxious because we didn't really know, well, how's COVID going to affect the developing fetus and all these other sorts of things. And it was just such a difficult time to navigate. And, fortunately, everything worked out just fine, and Jack is healthy and everything's great. But it was definitely a very difficult season to navigate. And, I'd be lying if I didn't say that was kind of the height for me of anxiety and some difficult struggles as a physician, as we're balancing, these patients who are in critical conditions that are not behaving the way that we thought they maybe, would in that situation with the pandemic, and then the home life as well, and how to navigate all that was something that I didn't think I would ever experience in my career, much less while I was in the end of residency. And so it was a really, really interesting time frame, certainly from that perspective. But I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that it goes to show as well, going the extra mile as a physician to establish that personal connection and build that relationship and get to know your patient can also really go the extra mile as well. And it sounds like you had some physicians who are pretty good at that and some who were not. And that is unfortunately how it goes sometimes. Kim, did you notice kind of the emotional burden that physicians carry in hindsight after experiencing the loss of your radiologist to suicide? Did you notice more of the emotional burden as you were going, or was that more of the eye-opener experience for you?
Well, I had been following Kevin MD for a year or 6 months before this happened. So that's when I had read every article, and I didn't know why. I was trying to educate myself, but it was after my first breast cancer surgery when I realized, the success was to my radiologist and my surgeon, and I knew how challenging things were. So I wrote them thank you notes. And then I wrote thank you notes to all my doctors. And I realized I wanted to find a way to support them. So I tried to make an inroads in my local healthcare system. And I found Dr. Michael Hirsch, and then I found Kevin MD, I think because of the algorithm. At the time it was on Facebook. So when I was reading the stories about emotional burden and also the statistics about 300 to 400 doctors a year die by suicide, and they may be outdated statistics, right? And then also sometimes people don't share it, or sometimes it's not known. There can be, many factors that come into play even with those statistics. So I knew also that there was like 1 million physicians in the country. So I was thinking in my head, okay, 1 million physicians in the country, 300 to 400 years die by suicide. That's horrible. We have to change it. But I was still like, I think that my doctors are okay. I hope my doctors are okay. And I had changed a few out for poor experiences, but I finally felt like I had a baseball team, like 9 doctors, right? That I loved them, and I would do anything for them, and I wanted to support them, and I thought they were okay, and I hoped they were okay. But then that's why when I showed up that day, it's kind of like most of the times your worst nightmare doesn't come true, but sometimes it does. So the fact that I already was walking around thinking about my doctor. So as far as that emotional burden, I was aware of those things, and I was thinking and hoping they were okay, and they were so wonderful with me. So then to find that out, it really was a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, and you mentioned this as well, that physicians we're oftentimes treated almost as superhuman, and we're expected to remain calm and knowledgeable and productive and compassionate and available regardless of what may be happening in our own lives. And that can be really difficult. And I know you've talked with countless physicians and on your podcast and written the books collaboratively and have a lot of experience and insight into this. Has there been, any specific things that stand out that physicians have shared with you about the emotional reality of practicing medicine today?
Yes, well, some things that I say now is I've come to understand that the culture of medicine needs to change, and it needs to start in med school, right? Because during med school and residency, when you're taught, the patient always comes first. So it's like, while you're performing a surgery or while you're running a code, yes, that's true. But it's just the emotional burden of, being in room to room, or being with a patient and things don't go well, or they might even die, and then having to go to the next room, that yes, you do need to compartmentalize in that moment or during the workday. But if you never unpack it and you press it all down, eventually you're going to have problems one way or another. And so that's a huge thing that I learned, is that doctors need to learn that it's even to feel their emotions, right? Because, and also I think even in training, you're taught like not to care too much. And there's a difference because I feel like if you don't care, that then you don't feel the same purpose, right? It's that part of the reason is you want to take care of patients, and then that physician-patient relationship is sacred. So there's a difference between, being present with the patient and letting it consume you, to the point that you don't unpack it. And then that's when you struggle. So it's like finding that balance, or being able to be with patients without taking it all in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that certainly can, lead to moral injury and burnout and those sorts of things as well. I think, and I think about burnout, I think sometimes the word burnout maybe puts too much responsibility on the physician themselves and not necessarily as much responsibility on the system. I mean, the loss of autonomy, electronic medical records, productivity, pressure, administrative demands, all those sorts of things really affect physicians. Have you noticed in your work that there's been, 1 or 2 things that seem to come up more so that impacts physicians from a burnout perspective or a system-wide perspective?
Yes, and I would say, right, a lot of doctors don't like the word burnout, but then as Dr. Michael Hirsch has shared, but they always Google the word burnout, right? Physician burnout. So, and I think it's exactly to your point because they prefer the term moral injury. And it is true that a lot of the reasons doctors are struggling today can be attributed to things like moral injury, like that they know what they want to do for their patient and they're prohibited from doing so, like even prior authorizations that get denied in all of those kinds of things. Now, but burnout, you can experience burnout and moral injury, and there's other professions that can experience burnout too. So it's kind of like you don't want to throw that baby out with the bathwater, but to acknowledge, right, that there are real systems issues. And speaking to what you said too, a lot of those drivers, I do feel like focus around like the loss of autonomy and excessive administrative burdens.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the name of your organization, it's direct. It's Stand Up for Doctors, and it's awesome. What does Standing Up for Doctors actually look like for you? Tell us a little bit more about the organization, how that got started, and what that looks like.
Sure. So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I didn't plan on doing any of this. But Dr. Michael Hirsch actually connected me on LinkedIn in the spring of 2023. And I started talking to doctors thinking that they could help me find ways to help my own doctors. And they were saying that they thought I was meant to make a bigger impact or that I could make a bigger impact outside the system. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I don't care. I don't have any grand plans. Like, I just want to help my own doctors. But as I started talking to them, I seemed to have a gift for knowing if I talked to a doctor, like who they'd want to connect with. Like before we got on this, before we pressed record, I already told you a doctor that I think you'd like to connect with, right? So I started connecting them with each other. So then by the fall, I was like, well, we need to amplify these voices. And that's when I started my podcast. And I came up with the name Stand Up for Doctors, and 4 is in parentheses, because when I'm interviewing physicians, I'm saying, stand up, doctors. We need you to raise your voice. We need to hear your stories. Every time a doctor shares their story, another doctor feels less alone. And when I'm interviewing others, I'm sending the message to why we need to stand up for doctors. So that's how the podcast started. And then the following summer, I started also a Substack newsletter, Stand Up for Doctors. And that's because I was sending my own doctors a monthly update on my advocacy efforts so they know that they had a patient who was really trying to help them. So I thought more people could hear about those efforts. And then a year ago, January, we reached out to the first 15 doctors who were guests on my YouTube channel. And that's when we came up with our book, White Coats, Courageous Hearts, True Stories of Doctors Reclaiming Their Humanity in a System That Challenges It. And my first 𝗵𝗆 article is a tribute to my radiologist. And since then, I've collaborated with several dozen physicians and others on 𝗵𝗆 articles. And I was honored that he wrote the endorsement on the back of our book. And then there's so many more stories to tell. We more recently came out with our second book, which is White Coats, Human Hearts, True Stories of Healing, Belonging, and the Courage to Stay Human in Medicine. And this one features the voices of 11 physicians, 2 physician spouses, and 2 patients, because all perspectives are important. And the other thing that's part of Stand Up for Doctors now is our physician retreat we're planning for this fall.
That is awesome. Yeah, well, it's so cool to see how conversations and relationships can just completely change the trajectory of your life. And Dr. Michael Hirsch and I know each other quite well. And he's an incredible individual. He's standing up for doctors. He's doing amazing things. And so it's so cool to see how those relationships can be so impactful. I wanted to ask you, Kim, why do you feel like physicians maybe sometimes struggle with being willing to share their story?
There's a lot of reasons for that. And it feels like, again, it goes back to the culture of medicine, where doctors are actually told in their training, put your head down and just keep going. And you're also trained, or you feel like you have to be perfect because patients' lives are at stake. But no one is perfect, right? So it's things like those, perfectionism, And then also through your training, hopefully if you have a good training, because some doctors don't, they have horrific experiences in some residencies, but sometimes you do have those bond with fellow residents. But once you're kind of quote unquote like dumped into a attending HUD, then you can feel very alone. So, and lose that sense of community. So I feel like sometimes doctors just feel very alone. And also I've had doctors share in each of these in each of our books, one doctor, he's a neurosurgeon and he had a pediatric case and it wasn't the outcome in the end that he was hoping for. And he carried around, like guilt and shame from that. And he thought he was the only one in the world that felt that way. And he shares how he had a beautiful reunion with the family. The boy is still alive and they were his best teachers, because when he apologized to them and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't bring your boy back to you." And they were like, "What?" They're like, "He's still alive. You saved his life." So this is, I think, such a wonderful example, is that for 15 years, what he felt was the worst case, and he stopped working on kids. He moved states. He was drinking scotch at night, smoking cigars, going on long walks himself, by himself. But once they said that to him, that changed everything. And a mentor had told him years ago, never worry about a patient alone. And he had to never worry about anything alone. And if he had taken his own advice, it would have saved him 15 years of grief and struggle.
How would you like to build real estate cash flow without dealing with tenants, toilets, or late night maintenance calls? This episode is brought to you by Rent to Retirement. If you're a busy physician or professional who wants passive income and long-term wealth through real estate, Rent to Retirement has been helping investors do exactly that for over 15 years. They offer fully managed turnkey rental properties in some of the best markets in the country, including opportunities priced up to $40,000 below market value. Their properties have delivered average projected returns in the 15 to 20% annual range. And in some cases, you can get started with as little as 5% down. The best part is, these are often A-class properties generating $500 per month or more in passive income. And their team, they handle the heavy lifting, including property management. Thousands of investors have used this strategy to generate portfolios, creating over $10,000 per month in passive income. To learn more, click the link below in the show notes or visit renttoretirement.com. And be sure to check out episode 70 of the Physicians and Properties podcast, where I sat down with CEO Dr. Zach LeMaster to break it all down. Yeah, so many physicians, I think, feel that way. And sometimes those outcomes are completely out of our control, but we feel that weight and that burden behind that. I love that. Never worry alone. That is fantastic advice that a lot of us can certainly, embed in practice for sure from that perspective. I want to pivot a little bit to the patient side. So what is something that an ordinary patient can do to better support their physician or advocate for their physician?
Well, some of it is, again, seeing your doctors as human. My friend Pat Dunstan, who was a nurse and became a lawyer and had to leave because she developed Parkinson's. In our first book, I share a quote from her where she said, "Doctors are expected to be superhuman and not complain because of their salary. Many people don't have empathy for them because they think a doctor's life is the ultimate." Right? Which you're like, ouch, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So then she understands that as a nurse and a lawyer. And then she actually writes a chapter in this book because she had the brain simulation surgery for her Parkinson's, which was done by a neurosurgeon. So sharing that gratitude. So through my work, I want patients to know and really see that your doctor, any struggle that you have, your doctor has them too. And we have doctors that wrote stories here from Australia and the UK and a physician spouse in Ireland, and that these struggles aren't unique. but that doctors are human around the world. So if patients first realize that, because when they're going to a doctor, unless it's a routine visit, they aren't at their best. But if you can try to think to also show some humanity, to your physician, or ask them how they're doing, and maybe they won't tell you, but they will appreciate that you asked, and then showing any kind of gratitude you can in the moment or later. So just stop to look them in the eye and say, thank you. And if you send them a note, there's so many doctors that have told me that they have a drawer or an envelope or something that they keep every note, letter, trinket that a patient has ever given them, and that it gets them through the hard days.
Yeah, that is great advice. I completely agree. As a family med doc, so often we kind of hear the bad, or like the frustration that, you had to wait, or access was poor, or whatever that may look like. And a lot of that is outside of our control. And so it is so beneficial. The things you can do in the primary care world: show up early to your appointment. That's going to be huge. Show up early to your appointment, fill out all the paperwork that we make you fill out ahead of time. And we're sorry that that's the case, but that's how the system is. And then, be willing to connect with us, say thank you, look us in the eye. All those sorts of things are beneficial. And the healthcare system I work with right now, I'm PRN, I'm a float provider. I work a couple of days per week, and I'm really grateful for that flexibility. But one of the clinics in particular that I work at, they will share all the comments that the patients make. And it's so nice to see the comments that are, constructive and grateful, and to learn from that is really, really helpful. Because sometimes we don't really know, like, hey, how did that experience go? How did they take my, bedside manner and the way I delivered the news and those sorts of things. And so leaving those comments and that feedback for your physician can be really beneficial. And try and leave more good news than bad news if possible. That can be really helpful.
Exactly. And because sometimes another good advice to patients is not to leave a poor review for your doctor if your review especially has nothing to do with the actual doctor. If you had trouble finding a parking space, right? Or if the receptionist wasn't up to par, like that doesn't reflect on the care the physician provided you. But sometimes people get so frustrated, right, for anything, whether it's a product, it could be hairspray that didn't work, right, or a carburetor, I don't know. But people tend to leave bad reviews when they get frustrated. But just to your point, think about what went well. And if there was something that you appreciated about your doctor, leave a review about that, or let them know. Like, patients will never know. And actually, the last time I talked to my doctor, I was at the beach, and he called me on the phone to thank me for my thank you note. And he said, patients like you are the reason I continue to do this. I'm sorry you're going through all this, but I'm looking forward to seeing you again. And I told him I was looking forward to seeing him again too. And It was just a few months later that he died.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That makes such a difference for physicians and for patients too. I mean, that gratitude is reciprocated as well. And, it's a difficult thing to express sometimes, especially if you are frustrated, by the front desk or the lab or the parking or whatever that may be. But thank you for sharing that. I wanted to kind of connect this more with physicians and properties. So I don't teach physicians to build wealth simply because they need to accumulate more money. I want doctors to have enough financial freedom that they can practice medicine on their own terms and how they want. Have you noticed that physicians feel financially or professionally trapped, and that's been really affecting their physician well-being? Anything that's come across from that perspective of maybe like the golden handcuffs, or as I like to say, the golden stethoscope?
I would say sometimes it just depends, on the specific physician. But sadly, I believe that is the reason that some med students or even residents die by suicide, because they've decided even early on that they have too much anxiety or depression, or that medicine isn't for them. But when they've already spent, or their family has spent all that money to put them through med school or to put them through residency. So if they already have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they don't see a way out and they don't see a way forward,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that debt burden is massive, and it's only increasing. And it leads to a lot of times med students feeling that weight or pressure to go into a specialty that maybe they don't actually feel called for, but it's just based off salary. And, I'm really fortunate. I was an Air Force doc, so they paid for med school, and I was able to use a small signing bonus to pay off my undergrad loans. And so I was able to graduate med school debt-free, and I always wanted to be a family physician. And so I didn't feel any of that weight or burden of like, well, the salary for a family medicine physician, although it's great, is like not nearly as good as an orthopedic surgeon. But I know a lot of my friends who are like, man, I really feel called to be a pediatrician, but I'm not going to be able to pay off $500,000, $600,000 in student loans in a reasonable time frame. So instead, I'm going to go be this specialist. And I don't think they're as happy as what they would have been or would have been if they pursued their calling of being a pediatrician in this example.
I fully believe that and understand it. And then also some even go on to more training to make more money. So even if they might have wanted to be a pediatrician, they'll go on. I believe it's even more training to be a neonatologist or pediatric critical care, like things like that to figure out, well, how can they make even more money?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think having some degree of financial freedom is going to give you the opportunity to have more autonomy. It's going to give you the opportunity to not feel the pressure of having to moonlight. It's hopefully going to give you the opportunity that you can cut back shifts if you feel like that's what's going to be beneficial for you and ultimately make you a better doctor and provide better care to your patients. And so a lot of times in like the physician finance space or real estate space, people try and bring it down and be like, oh, you're just trying to get people to quit medicine. That's only going to make the problem worse. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm trying to get it where physicians are able to practice medicine how they want to. And if they have some freedom and they have some flexibility, they're going to provide way better care and they're going to stay in medicine instead of feeling the need to quit or to leave or to go do some other profession.
For sure. And I've definitely seen, so a lot of doctors did struggle even more so during the pandemic for a myriad of reasons. And sometimes their practices slowed down for some of them, right? Whether it was like elective surgeries were canceled or slowed down, or office visits, right? A lot of them went remote. So some doctors did take that opportunity when they were struggling, that they felt they had the time and space to seek help or support, whether it was through therapy or coaching. And a lot of them did end up with side ventures, either related or unrelated to medicine. So whether it was investing, coaching, all kinds of side businesses. And sometimes it's actually one of our chapters in our latest book. Sometimes you have to feel better outside medicine to feel better inside medicine. And also for doctors that are struggling, one of the multitude of barriers that prevents them from seeking help is having the time to do it. Like a doctor, like lots of times they even put off their own, like I know a guy, a medical oncologist who was delayed in her own mammogram, right? Because she's always taking care of patients, but she's seeing patients with breast cancer. So it's like doctors delay even their own care, going to the dentist or any of those things, because of the demands of their day job, and that is extends to seeking mental health support. So speaking to your point, if you don't have to work full time or if you have some financial flexibility, you can take care of yourself, whatever that is, whether it's exploring a hobby, seeking mental health support, spending more time with your family, any of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a gift for me in my life and in my practice and my family. And I would encourage others to pursue that in some capacity as well. Kim, you've interviewed a lot of physicians, but also have a lot of experience doing different things like writing, and you've interviewed a lot of physicians who are involved in entrepreneurship and coaching and investing or advocacy. How can getting involved in those sorts of things reconnect you with purpose?
Because if you take the time, so doctors have shared with me the power of the pause. And every doctor needs to give themselves some white space. Hopefully once a day, even a few minutes, right? To go outside and take a walk, the time where it's just you. or once a week or once a month. And that power of the pause, because each doctor, what they need is different for them. And you need time even to listen to yourself. So when you take the time to do that, then you are able to think about what do you really need in one. And again, because doctors are told to put their patients first, and they do that all day long. But when they get home, they, want to put their family first, or feel like they should put their family first. So then they never get to think about, because it's your life too, and not to wait till retirement, to find, like your own passions. So it's that there is not one answer at all. So for some doctors, it's just, if you pause and think about, and if you don't even know, just take one step and try one thing. And sometimes it's even going back to, what did you enjoy as a teenager? Like, one of my doctors used to be in a band, and he started taking guitar lessons, right? Or for you, you got into investing. One physician started cooking and baking during the pandemic, and that's her. So everyone needs an outlet. And for some, it might even be writing research articles, right? Now, it might be doing things like related to medicine, but that they don't feel that they have time to do now. So I would just say, if you pause, when you do that, then that can help you, like, get back to your purpose, your why, and then what fulfills you to keep you going.
I love that. Yeah, I was talking with an entrepreneur one time, and they mentioned something similar. They were like, you need to take a day. This is if you're a full-time entrepreneur, like, you need to just have a day every week where you just think. Like, that is the job for the day, is just thinking. And at first I thought that was really silly, and I haven't, been able, or maybe it's just kind of my limiting belief to take the time to do that for a whole day. But just taking periods of time to, like, have the time to just think, like, hey, what are some of the challenges? What am I thinking? And I like to do that, being outside, hiking, walking the dog, those sorts of things, just have some silence and to think, because I think so often we're surrounded by all the noise of life, and always listening to podcasts and music and being around the family and seeing patients, that just having some time to be silent, just having some time to think, can be such a huge game changer. And, for me, that typically also looks like in the morning, having some time to read the Bible and read a little bit and pray and meditate a little bit, and just kind of think about, okay, what's going to happen today? What's going to come today? And have some gratitude time as well to set the stage for the day can be really, really important as well. I wanted to mention one other thing here real quick, Kim. I think a lot of times physicians almost feel powerless individually when it comes to facing problems in healthcare, right? All of us know healthcare is broken and the problems are enormous. How can someone contribute to meaningful change without believing that they must fix the entire healthcare system alone?
That's a very good question. And it brings to mind in what my work. So I'm revising my mission statement, and I currently am saying that I amplify physician voices and stories, and that I connect doctors for support, innovation, and systems change. And what is helpful for doctors to recognize within themselves is that they can be anywhere in that continuum during any course time in their career. So at some point, they might need support, and it would be surprising if they don't, right? And that's okay. And then at some point later, they might need support, even after they get support and feel that they've even moved on to innovating, doing something else that we've spoken about. And then there are doctors who feel well supported now, because the statistics vary as far as the number of doctors that are quote unquote burnout, from the 40s to the 60%. But that also means that some doctors aren't, and some doctors are thriving. And we need to find out and amplify, how are those physicians thriving? What are they doing? And some of it is things such as yourself. So it's what is the most important for you. So to first acknowledge that. Do you need support? And if you need support, there's so many resources, which again, we could put in the notes, including the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation, for which I'm an ambassador. If you're looking to innovate, I know lots of doctors doing that. I could, connect you with them. And if you're looking towards systems change, I'm also involved with Medicine Forward, and we're working on restoring the clinician-patient relationship. And Dr. Todd Otten and Dr. Marian Wilbur did that documentary, Suck It Up Buttercup, on systems change. I'm collaborating with Dr. Apurav Gupta with a loving organization. So there are also organizations out there that are looking at systems change. It would be helpful for doctors to know that. And if you connect with them, even to follow them, then you can see, well, what little thing could you do? And it might just be telling other people about those organizations that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for those resources. That was fantastic and really helpful to know that those organizations exist and how to get involved with them, and even just following them gives them the support that they need, and that can be really helpful as well. Well, Kim, I want to talk a little bit about your inaugural Stand Up for Doctors Physician Retreat that's coming up. So tell us more about that. Who's that designed for? What's that going to look like?
I would love to tell you. So thank you for asking. So I'll be turning 60 October 1st of this year. And I wanted to celebrate doctors keeping me alive because I shared with my nephrologist, it's not lost on me. If you got fed up and want to live on an organic farm or opened a pizza place and no one replaced you, I have no thyroid or working parathyroids, I would literally die. So I'm dependent on doctors to keep me alive. So I better be grateful. And I wanted to share my gratitude to doctors. So this retreat was designed by and for physicians. I have a physician team, and it's going to be a wonderful weekend of everything from improv for doctors, because, as you're trained, not to make mistakes, but in improv, there are no mistakes, or mistakes are fun. So from sharing just those fun icebreakers, but that also even helps like communication and just to relax and have fun and be silly. And through the weekend, we'll have topics and activities, and there's no boring lectures. So the topics, each doctor will speak to 10 to 15 minutes on a topic of interest to their colleagues, but then we'll break out in discussion groups. So the doctors, the whole weekend is focused on doctors being able to have any kind of conversations they want with their colleagues. And that's why I also have an extended time at lunch and before dinner and during our evening activities. And then we're also interspersing those topics with activities that bring you into your body, and that doctors have shared with me have made all the difference for them. So if it's anything from music, we have a drumming circle. And we have Dr. Beatrice Olson, who is also a professional artist. She's going to lead a session of abstract art. And all of these things, we have CME approval and funding for every topic and activity. And Sunday morning will be fantastic. The doctors there will raise their hand about what they want to talk about, and then we'll break out into as many groups. So if doctors there want to talk about investing, we'll talk about investing. If they want to talk about systems change, there's a group that can talk about that. If they want to talk about innovating, if they need support. And I don't know what those topics will be, because the doctors there on Sunday morning will decide that. And we're a whole hour and a half for that. So, and I feel like it won't be the beginning or the end. It'll be the middle, because we'll have a couple like fireside chats ahead. Anyone that wants to hop on, so they can meet. Some doctors already know each other, some don't. So we could do like an online meet and greet and then continue the conversation while we're there. And then when the doctors go back home, they'll have a community, like they're coming for that community and for that connection. And we have doctors coming from Australia, a doctor from Australia, a doctor from the UK. Here in the States, 18 different states are represented, 15 specialties, men, women, different ages from like late 30s to 70s, and some even retired doctors.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I think connection, relationships, it's so important in community. And so it's amazing to see that you're building that as well. I don't know when you sleep, Kim. You're doing so many awesome things. And thank you so much for your advocacy. Thank you for reminding us that doctors are not machines or productivity metrics are just names on a schedule, that we're human and we do difficult work. And thank you for supporting us. That really leads to better care for everyone. Before we finish, where can listeners learn more about Stand Up for Doctors? Where can they purchase the White Coat book series? Where can they register for the physician retreat?
Well, thank you. So those things can be found on my website, standupfordoctors.org. And there's two wonderful tabs. There's a books tab where you can see pictures of both books. You can see the authors and contact information for every author. And also you can purchase them. They're available Amazon, paperback, and Kindle. And then we have an inaugural physicians retreat tab. And that again shows you all of the speakers on our retreat. And there's a registration link. You can click that on and you can see all of the topics and activities who will be leading those discussions. And we would truly love to see you there. As of this recording, we have a dozen spots left. We wanted to keep it small, curated. So it's very meaningful for the doctors that are there. And as of today, we have 34 doctors registered. So we have room for a dozen more.
Sounds good. Yeah, make sure that you sign up for that inaugural physicians retreat. That's going to be amazing. Kim, thank you again for joining us. And to everyone listening, remember that financial freedom is not only about accumulating wealth, it's about creating enough control over your life that you can protect your health, your family, your purpose, and your ability to continue doing meaningful work. Thank you for giving us your most valuable resource today, listening to this podcast, giving us your time. I really appreciate it. I'm Dr. Alex Schloe with Kim Downey, and this has been another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Signing off.
Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial in any way. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.